My issue is this deeply embedded belief that I have to work hard to get done what needs to be done. Well, harder than anybody else.
Turns out to be a valid belief, doesn't it?
It does. Very self-fulfilling.
That's the trouble with those beliefs. They just keep proving themselves right over and over again. So when you start there by acknowledging, well, I'm making this so then what? Then what? How do you get to a place that's different than you expect? That's the question of all questions. Abraham, how can I get to a different outcome than the one I expect? And the answer is you can't.
Yes.
Expectation is your point of attraction.
Yes.
So then what occurs to you? Well, if what I expect is what I'm getting, and what I'm getting and expecting are not what I want, then what's the next logical question to ask? How can I change my expectation?
Yes.
How can I... Well, let's talk about what an expectation is. It's just a habitual vibration. You've expected it, and then you get it, and then you believe it all the more. Mm-hmm. We've been saying that if you're hanging around on the edge of your vortex in hope, the vortex will occasionally just take you in. And once the vortex takes you in, it will give you something that you want to believe. And once you begin believing some of what you want, then it takes you in frequently enough that you begin to know it. So it seems logical, to us at least, that when you understand that it's expectation, and you know that your goal is just to shift expectation, when we put it into the term shift vibration, does it make it easier for you to hear? Because shifting expectation is not easy for most people. In other words, if we say we're going to help you change your beliefs, most people go, oh, maybe I don't want to change my beliefs. I've worked hard at gathering them.
I think it's the pivoting point. I think because I understand that I am setting myself up for this. I understand it's my vibration, my expectation. I get so engrossed, enmeshed in it that...
But you see, here's what's going on. We've been talking about this, but what you've just said will make this a really easy answer for everyone to hear. So, we talked about it earlier, when you're outside the vortex trying to fix things up. So when you're outside the vortex trying to fix things up, you know what you do without meaning to? You just practice the outside the vortex vibration more. Your expectation just gets more and more entrenched. Here's a good way of acknowledging that. Have you ever been in a conversation with someone and you both think you're right and what you think is different from the other? And the more you try to convince that one, the more they're convinced of what they knew before you started talking, and you too. In other words, you just sort of dig in and hold your position. So that's what happens when you try really hard to pivot or to change an expectation from outside the vortex. It just makes you sort of dig in. It's almost like I'm challenging this belief, but the operative word is this belief, which is what's activated, and then law of attraction just shows you more like it, which makes you just believe it more. So it's like you can't get away from it, because the more you try, it's like saying, I'm not going to think about that. I'm not going to think about that thing that I'm not going to think about. I'm not thinking about that thing anymore. I'm not going to think about that. I'm not going to think about that. I'm not going to think about that. But you can't stop thinking about that. And the more you think you're not going to think about that, the more you're thinking about that, because it's what's active. So what we're talking about is deactivating one vibration by activating another. And here is by far the easiest way of going about that. Picture a cork bobbing up on the surface of the water, and let's call that no resistance, pure positive energy. Now you can hold the cork under the water, let's call that resistance or belief or a negative expectation. But when you let go of it, that cork's going to bob right back up. In other words, the point that we want to make with you is that you don't have to train yourself into more positive expectation. That positive expectation already exists and is calling you. And the negative emotion that you feel is you're pulling against it. Can you hear the difference in that? So we're just trying to get you to let go of the cork. And the way you let go of the cork, the easiest way is meditation. It's quieting your mind. It's thinking no thought. But earlier today, you may have heard us say, we've been saying it a lot lately, we want you to discover yourself in the vortex rather than trying to get in the vortex. Just say, occasionally I go in and I don't even know how I got there. I'm just going to discover myself when I am there and then milk it more. So if we were standing in any of your physical shoes, these are the two things in light of this conversation that we would focus upon. One, I'm going to discover myself in the vortex, and when I find myself there, I'm going to milk it longer. Because every moment that you spend trying to milk it, you're practicing the vibration of it. And that's how those expectations get into place. In other words, all an expectation is a vibrational practicing. So as you get in and practice it by milking it, and then talk about it more. Jerry and Esther had a wonderful weekend last weekend, and Esther is milking it for everything she can. She's talking about it, looking back at the pictures of it, talking about it, thinking about it, retracing her steps up to it and through it. In other words, when you have a wonderful thing that you have recently or even a long time ago experienced, and you milk it for the vibrational practice, let's call it for the vibrational practice. You're not doing it for the practice, you're doing it for the deliciousness. But when you practice the deliciousness of it, your vibration shifts until, without even knowing when it happened, your vibration pivots, your vibration shifts from this tendency that was stronger to this tendency that was stronger. Have you ever watched a tug of war with 6 big men on one side of the mud pit and 6 big men on the other side of the mud pit, and they're both pulling with everything that they have? And a lot of times it's just, you can't really tell which way it's going to go. And then all of a sudden, one just gets a little bit more momentum going and over it goes. It's sort of like that. It's like just practicing until the tendency is just more that than that. That really is all there is to it.
And I think I've got it backwards. I love what I do. I have fun doing what I do, and I get excited about it, and I start getting into it, and it seems like it grows and it grows and it grows until it's now gotten control of every aspect of my life. And so I start pushing back. No, I don't want to do it that much. And then I pull back, and then it starts getting fun again.
Well, that's the nice thing about this balance that you live in. In other words, it's like you like to eat a good meal, but if you were told you can't do anything else, you want some balance. And so it's like you live in a house with not enough closets, you want more closets. You have too much to do, you want more freedom. You have so much freedom, you're bored, you want more to do. You have too much to do, you want more freedom. It's just this constant. But the key to it is to care enough about how you feel that you're making more of your decisions from inside the vortex, and then it doesn't go so far before you pull it back into balance. Does that make sense to you?
Yes, it does. Yes, it does.
In many ways, we're making too much of all of this. But the reason that we do is because most of our physical friends are oriented completely toward the physical, to observing what is manifested, and therefore to let what is dictate or dominate their vibration. And when you decide that you're going to be a deliberate creator, then you decide that what is no longer what's going to dominate your vibrational patterns. You decide that alignment, that feeling good, is what's going to dominate or dictate which thoughts you choose. And once you consciously make that decision, then every moment in your experience becomes easier, because it's sort of like sitting in front of a television and there's already something on, and you just sit down and accept it. Do you ever do that? Or is the first thing you're doing is reaching for that remote to find something that is more pleasing to where you are in that moment? But imagine not having access to the remote, and someone comes in and says, "Why are you watching that?" And you say, "Because it's on." Do you like it? Not really. Do You find it interesting? No, not really. Well, why do you keep watching it? Because it's on. Well, why don't you watch something else? Well, because it's on. And it sounds absurd and like we are maybe even exaggerating, but we're really not exaggerating that much. From the way, why are you thinking about that? Because it happened. Why are you thinking about that? Because it's in front of me, because it's an issue. It's an issue that's active, and therefore I think I have a responsibility to examine it. And we say, your responsibility, we don't use that word much, or at all, unless we are mocking you. But if there is any way to apply responsibility, it's to aligning with who you really are. You have a responsibility, you could say, to being in vibrational sync with who you really are. So what it comes down to with you, and we'll leave it with this, is these are the things you want to take away from this conversation. I'm going to do all of my efforting from inside the vortex, just for a little while. All of my deliberate thinking and scripting and planning, I'm going to do from inside the vortex, which means I'm going to be feeling great when I ponder anything. And what you'll begin to discover, you can take an issue and that takes you outside the vortex every time you think about it. And you can be inside the vortex all milking while you're there. In other words, I feel good for this reason, or for this reason, and for this reason, and for this reason. And then as you introduce your issue to the vortex, the first 100 or 200 times you do that, the vortex will spit you right out. But if you're determined to be in your vortex while you are thinking about, and here's the thing that makes the difference. On the other side of the problem is a solution. On the other side of the issue is a satisfying solution. So there are no issues in the vortex. There's just solutions and opportunities and remarkable rendezvous and fun things to do and insights and clarity. Advantages, you see. So as you make the vortex your dominant intent and then introduce your issue to it while you're in there until you start finding the other end of that vibrational stick, in time, you will find yourself appreciating every former issue because of the solutions that it has brought to you. We are never concerned about where you are in relationship to what you want, because we know unequivocally that you can get from wherever you are to wherever you want to be. But this was a particularly delicious experience because we felt the flexibility, if you will, of your vibration and your willingness to rendezvous with us in new places. Many of the words that we said are the same as those that you may have heard before, but the intensity of them and the bumping into yet a new place was extremely satisfying here. It feels to us as if, for the most part, you are accepting the reality of this vibrational reality. And the next thing that's about to take place for you is that now that you've accepted the reality of this vibrational reality, it will show itself to you in more vivid ways, just by knowing that it exists. What you can expect over the next few days is insight about things that you've been wondering about, maybe things that weren't even active here today, because you have had, as a result of your participation here, whether you sat in the hot seat or not, a vibrational shift. And that vibrational shift means that everything that you focus upon from this point forward, as long as this vibrational shift is active within you, will yield you a different outcome, some slight and some great, that you have received before. You're going to notice some relationships will have shifted dramatically as a result of this brief conversation that we've had here today. Our strongest enthusiasm about what's taken place here today is that you have been reveling in the vibrational altitude, so to speak, of the frequency of your inner being. And what that means is you've been allowing cellular communication throughout the day in a way that you usually don't.